So here's something that I know for sure. White people in positions of power do not believe any of the things that they are saying about DEI. These attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion, because I really think we need to stop saying DEI, because in a way that buries what it is that we're really talking about. We're talking about principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's important to say the three words, because once you understand what we mean about diversity, which is simply just encouraging the bringing people from lots of different backgrounds and ways of thinking into a space. Equity, right, is not even the same as equality, but it's like leveling the playing field, right? And inclusion is including everybody again, right? So you want to have lots of different people involved in workplaces, decision-making, positions of authority, and so on. You want to have a level field for all of them, and you want to try to include as many people as possible. What kind of people, what kind of human beings, and what kind of country would want to put something like that, make something like that against the law, while they claim that they are in support of merit, right? So you have to understand that this is really not about that. It's just a vehicle for them to seek to take away the advances that Black people have made since the 1960s when the Voting Rights Act was passed, Brown versus Board of Education being the first major change, then the Voting Rights Act, then the Civil Rights Act, right? What they're really trying to do is, by demonizing that term and, convincing the undereducated, which is a vast majority of white people in America, is to use the term DEI, which you can then attach anything to, right? A lot of them probably don't even know what the DEI stands for anymore. They just know that they're against it because Fox News told them that it was bad. But it really is that the biggest issue, I think, for white people, to be clear, is Black people, once the doors got opened a little bit, began to realize that we're just as good as they are, just as smart as they are, and in many ways better. Because clearly we're morally superior to them in every way possible. That's not even a question, that's just a statement of fact. And as I shared in that clip from Toni Morrison, if they really believed that we were inferior, why would they make so many efforts to keep us from having equal access to the things that they have? If they really thought that we couldn't keep up and that we weren't superior or equal to them, why would the powers that be make so much effort to not only keep us out of the room, but the door has been cracked to make sure they close the door and put a deadbolt, on it, right? Why? If you really believe that someone is not as good as you, can't keep up with you, why would you make those kinds of efforts? So the reality is that they don't believe any of the things that they say. And the biggest hoax they've ever played is getting us to believe it, getting so many of us to internalize the things that they have said about us, even to this day. I think that when Barack Obama became elected, that's when they just realized they had to turbocharge all the plans they've been making and all the efforts they've been making to roll back our rights since the 1960s, because they realized that not only were we as good as them, and definitely good enough for someone that looked like us to be elected president, and to be a great president, to do the job well, to do the job better than most of them have done it. Not only did we see it, but their children saw it too. And that's what really scares them. They're afraid of not just that they know it, but that their children were being told and we're seeing the same thing. And that's why there's such an effort to attack the Department of Education, take away the ability for poor Black kids to access public school education, right? And equal public school. From the time that they said that we could go to the same schools as them, they started defunding public education, right? And everything now is being turbocharged because they realize that when we get even a little bit of access, because we've never achieved equal access, that we still haven't been able to leverage it into surpassing them in many, many areas. And they see it in the workplace. That's why dealing with us, especially with us Black women, is so hard for them, because not only are we Black and then we're women on top of it, right? And come in with more degrees than they have, more qualifications than they have, more experience than they have, and they hate it. And, you know, I know that this is not really about anything but racism, because the reality is that if we have a conversation, as I said on the Karen Hunter show, about merit, we would win that argument as well. So they really don't want to have a discussion about merit any more than they want to have a discussion about real diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I really want people to realize what this is really about, if you haven't figured it out, and to never believe that they believe the things that they say. They don't believe the things that they say, and it's really important that we stop believing the things that they say. The thing is, this has never been about what they've been saying it's about, right? And really a big part of this has been not to even convince, you know, it's of course to convince the uneducated in their ranks, the undereducated and the uneducated in their ranks, because, you know, they do love the uneducated. But it was also partly to convince us as well, to convince us that we were only able to achieve the things that we were able to achieve because they gave us something. They didn't give us anything. They didn't give us anything. And what's sad is that they have managed to convince a lot of us that they gave us something, when in fact, we haven't really benefited from any of their DEI and their affirmative action programs. Those who have benefited the most have been white women, veterans, and people with disabilities, usually primarily the ones who are not Black, right? And then Black people and other. There's data on who's benefited the most, but definitely been women, white women. So the reality is that not only did they not give us anything, right, that we had to continue to struggle and continue to fight and continue to be the best of everything, but what they've spent their time doing is convincing us that they did something for us and that we never deserved it. And unfortunately, a lot of us have bought into that idea. Not the majority of us, but a significant amount of us have bought into that idea, right? And so they've spent the last how many decades since Brown and the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act figuring out ways to unravel it all, right? Because they are nothing without their white supremacy and their idea of whiteness. They have nothing else to cling to. They know that they are not morally superior to us, and they know they're not intellectually superior to us either, because people who really believe that wouldn't be making such an effort to hold us back. If they believed that we couldn't keep up, that we weren't as smart, that we weren't as good, they wouldn't. I think the key thing for us to know and understand is that a lot of the time that they've spent with these narratives was spent more than anything to convince us of the things that they want us to believe about ourselves. And it's really important that we recognize what's really going on, because the reality is that they have never been superior in any way, and that they know it. And what's most important now is that we know it and that we act accordingly. It's very important that we release the idea that anything has been given to us, because it hasn't. And some of us do believe that. Nothing has been given to us. And that we realize that even in an environment where they might be trying to take things away, that we are still going to be okay, because we have always figured out a way to be okay. And so I just want to say that don't listen to the foolishness that they're saying. If they really thought and believed the things that they said, they wouldn't have to go after companies who have decided that they still want to be inclusive and equitable workplaces. They wouldn't have to be doing all the things that they're doing if they really believed that they were better. So I say what we need to do is tell them to bring it on. Because in a world where they want to raise issues of merit and qualifications, we win hands down every single time. And so instead of focusing on trying to win the DEI argument, we need to just continue to point out the reality that no matter what they call it, the reality is that we're here, we're not going anywhere, and we know that the things that they've said about us is not true, and that they don't even believe it. And so there's absolutely no reason that we should.